Good day, grade 12 learners, and welcome to today's English First Additional lesson. My name is Elizabeth Meyer, and this lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Sci-Bono, Discovery Centre, and broadcast by Bokama Research and Development. Well, I hope you're ready for today's lesson. Today, we are starting with language, and we're looking at all the language aspects you need to know to have your paper 1 perfectly done. I thought it'd be a good idea to start with a quick brain teaser. So, you'll see on a screen, there's question number 1. What is the name of the person hidden in the word? And you'll see a word there, horobot. Let me go on to question 2 and then I'll tell you. The next question is, identify the word where the letters are not in alphabetical order. So you've got 3 words. Which word is the letters not in alphabetical order? A nice brain teaser. I'm sure you've got it by now. So let's go back to the first one. We gave you a name, horobot. I want to know the name of a person. Now, let me show you how quick it is. If you look carefully, you will see we've got Robin, Rob, who is in the hood. Robin Hood. That was your answer to the brain teaser. Let me repeat it for you again. There's Rob, is inside the hood, H-O-O-D. Clever, hey? And the second one, could you find the word where the letters are not in alphabetical order? Well, it's quite difficult, actually. And the answer was number C, 80. If you quickly went through your alphabet, you'll know that it should be G-H-I. So because of that, the I in front of a G, it's not in alphabetical order. All right, that was just a quick brain teaser to get you going. So let's look at your paper 1, question 5. Now, when you get this, you have to remember that you're going to get 2 texts, a text F and a text G. Now, the text F is the one that's a prose text, and questions with language questions will be based on this text for 14 marks. And then you have text G, which is usually a visual text, for another 6 marks. So be ready for that. But the big question is, what is then tested? Well, there's a number of things that are tested. First of all, we're looking at concord. Now, this is one of the topics that we will be discussing today, is your subject-verb agreement. So this is one of the things I love to ask you. Obviously, active and passive voice. Question tags. We've got direct and indirect speech, either way around. We've got negative sentences. We've got question forms. Now, remember, a question tag and a question form might be different from each other. And we've got combining 2 sentences in one. Now, these are just a number of things that are tested in paper 1, question 5. If we go on, you'll see that we're going to look at the apostrophe today as well. When and how to use it. And we're going to look at parts of speech. So this is our focus for today. We're going to look at parts of speech, at concord, and the apostrophe. Tenses, you'll be required to rewrite a sentence from one tense to the other. Vocabulary, and I know it's sometimes difficult. Here they focus on words like synonyms, antonyms, homonyms, homophones. So in another lesson, we'll look at those ones, singular and plural forms, and critical language awareness. So these are some of the topics that they test in your question 5 of paper 1. So what about today? Now, today we're looking at specifically at parts of speech. And I know it seems quite easy, but I think sometimes we forget the little detail. So this is what we'll be focusing on today. Now, what you have to remember is that every part of speech, every word in a sentence actually has a name according to its function. And if you know what its function is, you'll be able to figure out what part of speech it is. So I found a little part of speech song for you. And no, I'm not going to sing it to you. I'll just read it to you, but you're welcome if you've got a musical voice to sing it. Now let me run through this. It's very cute. It goes as follows. Every name is called a noun, as field and fountain, street and town. In place of noun, the pronoun stands, as he and she can clap their hands. The adjective describes a thing, a magic wand, a shiny ring. The verb means action, something done, to read, to write, to jump, to run. How things are done, the adverbs tell, as quickly, slowly, badly, well. The preposition shows relation, as in the street or at the station. Conjunctions join in many ways, sentences, words, or phrase and phrase. The interjection cries out, hark! I need an exclamation mark. So that's just a cute part of speech song that might get stuck in your head, and maybe that will help you to remember. So another one that's very nice is the following video. Maybe this will help you to remember them.
Let's learn the parts of speech. Let's learn the parts of speech. They'll help you write and to read. Let's learn the parts of speech. Nouns, pronouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives, conjunctions, prepositions, interjections. Now let's learn their functions. A noun is a person, place, or thing, animal, idea, almost anything. Like a teacher, schoolyard, or basketball, cheetah, love, or the season of fall. A pronoun takes the place of a noun, and sentences, you see them all around. Like she had a party, he went to school, I play soccer, they swam in a pool. A verb is a word that gives a sentence action. What's going on, or what's the main attraction? Like the dog walked, the runner jogged, the car sped, the dancer clogged. An adverb describes an adjective, verb, and such, and tells how, when, where, how often, how much. Like he ran quickly, school starts soon, my teacher always eats lunch at noon. Let's learn the parts of speech. Let's learn the parts of speech. They'll help you write and to read. Let's learn the parts of speech. Nouns, pronouns, verbs, adverbs, adjectives, conjunctions, prepositions, interjections. Now let's learn their functions. An adjective describes a noun or a pronoun, like that's a big house. I have a small dog. I saw a ferocious lion. They make reading and writing more exciting. A conjunction is a word or words that connect words, phrases, or clauses. Get it? Like Ella was early and Lisa was late. The dog wanted dinner but had to wait. A preposition tells time, place, or position. Connecting words is its main mission. Like Josh ate breakfast before school. My friend who sits beside me is cool. An interjection expresses strong emotion. It's true, like wow, hey, yeah, ooh. They're used to make reading, writing more appealing. Interjections express spontaneous feeling. Let's learn the parts of speech. Let's learn the parts of speech. They'll help you write and to read. Let's learn the parts of speech. There are 8 parts of speech. How many? 8 parts of speech. You got it. 8 parts of speech. They'll help you got it. They'll help you read. Yeah.
Well, I hope you've learned now the 8 parts of speech. Thank you, Mr. Hartman. That really helped. So let's start with nouns. Now you have to remember there are 4 types of nouns. And a noun is used to name a person, a place, or a thing. So the easiest ones to remember is always the proper nouns. These are person, places, days, months, and usually written in a capital letter. So they're the most important ones. That's your personal one, proper noun. And then you've got your common nouns. These are things that, well, everywhere. You can touch it, you can see it. There's plural, we can give it gender. Usually we can put an a or an or a the in front of it. It's just one of the rules to remember. Our next type of noun is what we call the abstract noun. Now, this one is something different because this describes a feeling or emotion. So unlike the common noun that you can see and touch and put into a plural, obviously an abstract noun you can't. And abstract nouns are like emotions that you'll be feeling. The next one we're looking at is collective noun. So lots of something, a swarm of bees, a pack of hyenas. So these are your 4 types of nouns. In the exam, if you're asked to find a noun or to explain what kind of is, these are the ones you'll have to use. Proper, common, abstract, and collective. Right, let's move on. Now, the pronoun is linked to the noun. I want you to look very carefully. As you can see, it says pronoun. So pronoun means it takes the place of a noun. Now we have quite a number of them. So let's run through them very quickly. Obviously, the easiest one, of course, is your personal one. That's, for instance, I do my work. She does her work. They do their work. So instead of saying Elizabeth is doing her work, I can say she's doing her work. That is a personal pronoun. The next one that we have is the indefinite one. Where the personal pronoun was quite specific, the indefinite one isn't specific at all. It may refer to people or things in a general way. Someone, anyone, everyone. I know you love using this one, especially if you've done badly in a test. And you'll tell your parents, or everyone failed. Right, so that is an indefinite pronoun. The next one we're looking at is a possessive pronoun. So possessive shows ownership. For instance, in a sentence, this is hers. It's not yours. In that case, hers and yours are possessive pronouns. It shows who belongs to what. Relative. Now, relative is almost like a conjunction, so you have to be careful. These are words like whom, who, whose. Let me give you a sentence. This is my sister who is visiting me. So you'll see it forms a conjunction between phrases. That's a relative one. The next one is your demonstrative one. Now we're referring to something very specific. And we'll use the words like this, that, these, those. It's almost like to demonstrate this, that, these, those. You'll have to remember it like that. Now, reflexive, I need you to think here of a mirror. Reflexive means it refers back to the noun or the pronoun. Let me give you an example. Mary sees herself in the mirror. The word herself refers back to Mary. It would sound very odd if we had the sentence, Mary saw Mary in the mirror. That doesn't sound right. So Mary sees herself in the mirror, and the herself refers back to Mary. And your last one is interrogative. Now, this comes from the word to interrogate. And this is where you ask questions, words like who and what and which. Those are pronouns. So, I hope it's clear. Remember, a pronoun stands in the place of a noun. As you look at the word pronoun, it's still connected to the noun. And that's one way to remember it. So the next one we're looking at is adjectives. Now, adjectives are linked obviously to pronouns and nouns in another way, because they describe your noun or your pronoun. So those three always hang out together. Now, be careful. The adjective can stand in front of a noun. For example, in the sentence you have it, the clever or diligent boy won the prize. So boy is your pronoun, and the word clever or diligent is describing the boy. But the adjective can also follow a linking verb. Look at the sentence. The boy is clever or diligent. Even though it's standing there, it is still describing the boy. So be careful when you read the sentence and try to find first your noun or your pronoun, and then figure out which word is describing your noun or your pronoun. Right. Now, one thing you have to remember about adjectives and adverbs is that there are degrees of comparison. And this is one way we can figure out that they are an adjective. Now, I found a cute little joke for you. So let's see if you know the answer. What gets wetter and wetter the more it dries? Let's try again. What gets wetter and wetter the more it dries? Do you know the answer? No, I'm sure you do. It is, of course, a towel. So when you use a towel, it gets wetter and wetter, the more it dries off you. Now, let's look at your different degrees. Now, you'll have to remember, in the exam, we will never ask you to name the degrees of comparison. We will usually give you a sentence and we'll ask you to write the correct form of the verb. But just for interest's sake, the first one is obviously your positive degree, or it can be your negative degree. Then we got your comparative degree that you have to use. And then you've got your superlative degree. And that's the when it's the most and it's the perfect one. Comparative obviously comes from the word to compare. So in that case, as you can see in my picture, we'll have two people that are compared to each other. But in the superlative, we'll have the smartest. So he is the best of them all. So keeping that in mind, let's see how it works. We'll start with a comparative degree. So in this case, two objects are compared with each other. Now, to form a comparative degree, you need to add ER to the absolute form if your word is of a single syllable. And that's really important to remember. So when your word is only a single syllable, we'll add ER. But if your word has more than one syllable, you'll have to add more. Not most, but more. Remember, we are comparing two things to each other. Now, in a superlative degree, things look a little bit different. This is to say when the person or the thing has the most or is the best. And you'll hear I'm using the whole time. Now, if we go back to the previous one, you'll remember the comparative one. We are comparing two people or two things. Now, a clue to help you here is usually than. You'll usually use than or say between the two. So you'll be able to figure out that we're comparing two people or two things. But with a superlative, we're only talking about one person who is the best. And usually the word the stands in front of our word. So in this case, in a superlative degree of comparison, we add EST for a single word. If your word is a single syllable, we'll add est. But the more the syllables are, then we'll have to add most. Now, please remember, you can't use est and most together in one word. That's just going to sound extremely funny. So be careful for that one. Let me give you an example. This is how the question will look in the exam. Give a correct degree of comparison in the following sentence. And now I've given you a sentence there. It says some tourists are, and in brackets, friendly than others. Now, if you're clever here, we'll see we are comparing that some tourists are something than others. So obviously we are in the comparative degree of comparison that we need. Now, friendly, the only thing we're going to do is friendlier. Or, because it's more than one syllable, we can say more friendly. Now remember, we're comparing some tourists to other tourists. So we are on the comparative one. So we could either add er, or we can say more friendly. Now, the big question is when to use more and most, because you have to be really careful. So let's look at this. If your word is one syllable, like smaller, sweet, big, or hot, then in a comparative degree, we're just adding an er. And I have to warn you, spelling counts. So if you look like the word like big or hot, you have to add another one, T or a G. Be careful for that one. I always say it's like adding another soldier. You just have to make sure there are enough of them. Even in the superlative degree, you add est. But look at the spelling of hottest. Double T, est. So make sure of your spelling. So, we've got two or more syllables. If it ends with a Y, or it really ends with an ER, what happens then? So here we go. So if it ends with a Y, we take the Y away and we replace it with an I-E-R. Look at the word heavy. Heavy, heavier, heavier. Happy, happier, happier. Right. Now, obviously, ladies and gents, you have to be careful for spelling here. Now, let's quickly look at two or more syllables. So if you have words like expensive and beautiful, can you hear all those syllables? Beautiful. Obviously, we have to use more and most, and this is where we use them. So we're going to use more beautiful, and in the superlative degree, we're going to use most beautiful. Obviously, when you say it for yourself, you'll hear when it doesn't sound right. Well, these are just some rules that you have to remember. Now, as always, there's always an exception to the rule, so be careful. So we've got some what we call irregular forms, and these guys you just have to know off by heart. So we've got good, better, and then the best. We've got bad. Now, you can't say badder. It just doesn't sound right. Bad, worse, the worst. And please check the spelling there as well. And can you see in the superlative degree of comparison, we have a the in front of it. Little becomes less. We compare two people, and the least. And much and many becomes more or the most. As I say, these are irregular ones. So you have to make sure that you know them, and just make sure you know, get the spelling right as well. Now, do you want to give it a try? I've got a quick one here for you. So it says, rewrite the following sentence and give the correct form of the word in brackets. I want to show you something very quickly, but you have to be really careful. When it says rewrite, it means you have to rewrite the sentence. Be careful. Don't only write the correct answer now. You have to make sure that you rewrite it. Right. Now, as you can see on the question, it says rewrite the sentence, give a correct form of the word. Now, here's our sentence. Watching the Springboks at the stadium is good than watching them on television. And I hope by now a little bell has rung in your head when you saw the word than. Because what are we doing here? We are comparing two things. We are comparing watching the Springboks at the stadium and watching them on television. So there are two things that are being compared. So we are in a comparative degrees of comparison. Now, you know, this is one of the irregular ones. So good. Yes, I'm sure you've got it right. Let's look at your answer. Is better. And please make sure that spelling good becomes better. Oh, well done. Let's try another one. So there we go. There is the better one. But please be careful for our spelling. Double T. Eh? You have to make sure you've got a double T. Otherwise, it's going to sound like beater. We don't think it's an Afrikaans English word like that. Now, I'm going to give you, let's say, 120 seconds to complete the following five. So again, I'm giving you a word in brackets. You need to complete the sentence giving the correct form of the adjective here. And let's just quickly run through these questions. So you had to change the adjective so that it fits into the sentence given. So if you look at the first one, Jeremy is 10 years old, Jenny is 8 years old, and then we have Jeremy is old than Jenny. Jeremy is old than Jenny. And then number 2 said the Alps are the high mountains in Europe. Number 3 said an ocean is very large. It is large than a sea. I hope you remember that one. Number 4 was a Rolls Royce costs a lot of money. A Twingo costs less. A Rolls Royce is expensive than a Twingo. And then number 5 says John's results were bad. Fred's results were very poor. Fred's results were bad than John's. Now, may I give you a little bit of advice? Some of these might look very easy, but whenever you get in the exam paper a question like this, I suggest you read it a few times. The trick is to read 3 times, think twice, and write once. So just be careful that we don't catch you out. So let's look at the answers, and I'm sure you've gotten them all right. So let's look at the first one. So we've got Jeremy and Jenny, and obviously Jeremy is then older than Jenny. That's an easy one. The Alps are the highest mountain in Europe, and your clue was obviously the highest. Huh? That was your clue to help you then, that one. An ocean is very large. It is larger than a sea. There's your trick word there. And that tells you can just add an ER. A Rolls Royce costs a lot of money. A Twingo costs less. A Rolls Royce is more expensive. Now we have to use more expensive, more, because we've got how many syllables here? Let's look. Expensive. Or at least more than 2. So you have to make sure that we use more there. And remember, we are comparing 2 things with each other. And for that reason, we have to use more. We couldn't use most here because we're still comparing 2 things. Now, the next one is a tricky one. John's results were bad. Fred's were very poor. Now, then they refer to Fred again. So, Fred's results were worse than John's. Be careful for that one. Worse. Eh? So we're still comparing Fred and John's results, but Fred ones were worse than John's. All right. I'm sure we didn't catch you out on that one. Do you want to try another one? Now I've got another few sentences for you. Let's quickly look at them, what we gave you. Now, it says this exercise is not very difficult. It is than I expected. We'll look at the answers now. The next one said number 7, the weather's not good today, it's raining. I hope the weather will be good next week. And number 8, people are not very friendly in big cities. They are usually friendly in small towns. In the Republic, the president is the important person. And number 10 said, people say that Chinese is difficult to learn than English. Right, so let's look at your answers. Are you ready? Here we go. Let's look at the first one. This exercise is not very difficult. It is less difficult. Oh, I want you to be careful for this one. My first instinct was, when I saw the sentence, was to write, it is easier than I expected. But the word easy doesn't appear in the original sentence. So I can't add a new word. Remember, we're working with degrees of comparison. So the word I was looking for is difficult. And that's why you still had to keep difficult on this side, but you had to include less difficult. Well, I'm sure you got it right. Let's look at the next one. So the weather is not good. It's raining. I hope the weather will be better next week. Right, so we're comparing this week's weather to next week's weather, and we're still in a comparative one. With the next one, we're looking at the word friendly, and I'm sure you got this right. Now remember the rule I showed you. The moment we've got a Y, we replace it with an IER. We can't keep the Y, so you have to replace it. Now, number 9 is the only one that we have is in the superlative degree. And our clue was this little word here. In the Republic, the president is the, and important obviously has more than one syllable. We had to keep the most important. And people say that Chinese is more difficult to learn than English. So again, we're comparing. We know difficult has more than one syllable, and we had to include more. There you go. Well done. I'm sure this was really easy for you. Now, the whole thing about this is practice, practice, practice. The more you play with adjectives and the more you try to put them on all the degrees of comparisons, the easier it will become. Now, another thing that you have to do and should be able to do when studying adjectives is to recognize them by using the following suffixes. Now, there's a whole list of them. I only highlighted a few of them to show you what it looks like. Now, some of our adjectives are formed with able at the end, like laughable, available, inseparable. Can you see them? So, if you are struggling to identify them, you can look for this. It might be one of the ways to identify an adjective. Let's look at the next one. Here we've got able, invisible, terrible, horrible. We even have full, wonderful, merciful, fearful. And can I quickly just highlight something here? I need you to note here that your full, as you can see, always ends with one L. It's full. The moment full connects with another word to make a new word, it's full. It doesn't want another L at the end. There's something to remember. That's why beautiful is never spelled with a double L, or merciful only has one L. I'll say again. So when you connect full with another word, it only has one L. Right, let's see what's the next one. Less. So we've got words like hopeless and painless. That little word less means without. So if you can identify that, you know we're working with an adjective. Some, handsome, wholesome, quarrelsome. There's another one. Oh, Eos, courageous, victorious. You have to look at the spelling there. Now, these becomes quite difficult. Instantaneous, look at that spelling, and dangerous. Now, obviously, we are what we call manipulating words. So we're changing words to form a noun or a verb or an adjective or even an adverb. And you will be required to do it as well in the exam. So let me show you how it works. So we can give you a word like competition, which is a noun. And we can change it then to a verb, which will be compete. But I can also change it into an adjective, competitive, or an adverb, competitively. Wow, amazing, hey? So let's try this. In the exam, the question would look something like this. Give a correct form of the word in brackets. Supermarket or offer a wide variant of hot beverages. So obviously variant you have to change or manipulate to fit into our sentence. Did you get the answer? No, I'm sure you did. Variant becomes variety. And there's your answer. If you got variety right, and please note the spelling, V-A-R-I-E-T-Y, then well done to you. Right. Well, this is just one way how one word using a noun can be changed into a verb, an adjective, or adverb. And obviously the other way around as well. We can give you an adjective and ask you to change it back to a noun. It's as easy as that. Now, once again, it's time for a little exercise. I'm going to read the questions with you slowly, just to give you an idea. Let's start with number 1. It says, Peter is a suspicion person. We have to change suspicion. Number 2 says, that is a humor anecdote. Number 3, you must use melt lead. Number 4, I admire his example behavior. Number 5, Joe is a compelled liar. 6, I do not like my wool scarf. Number 7, he is a Poland citizen. Number 8, he has a lion appearance. Number 9, science is a compelled subject. And number 10, he revealed in secrets. Right, I'm not going to give you lots of time. I'm only going to give you again. Let's make it 120 seconds. I like the 120 seconds. And see if you can try it. But please be careful now for spelling, because our spelling is going to count here. So quickly write down. You can only write down the word. You don't have to rewrite the sentence. So do you want to see what the answers are? Let's run through them. Right. So the first one we gave you is suspicion. Peter is a suspicion person. Now you can just hear it doesn't sound right. Now what we wanted to have is suspicious. But look at that spelling. Make sure we've added here a O-U-S at the end. So hopefully your spelling looks the same as mine. Number 2, that is a humor anecdote. It's always easier to pronounce it than to write it, isn't it? So we need humorous. So we added O-U-S. A nice little suffix there. Number 3 is a little bit of a trick. You must use melt lead. Now this one changes into molten. Now can you see our E has changed over to an O? Molten. Right. I admire his example behavior. In this case, we're looking at exemplary. Exemplary. Now, can you see how easy it actually is? You're keeping the first part of a word and you're just adding a little part at the back. Next one. Joe is a compelled liar. Now, obviously, we need a compulsive liar. Not compelling, compulsive. I do not like my wool scarf will become woolen. Now remember, we need a double L here. And I'm a little soldier there. Number 7, we gave you a personal noun, if you remember correctly, Poland, and we wanted a Polish. Now, when you rewrite this, please remember that you have to keep a capital letter. If you were to write it with a small p, it would have been incorrect because it's still a proper noun. Right. He has a line appearance. Let's see if you got this one right. A leonine. Sure. If you haven't heard of this before, well, this is a new word for you. And science is a compound subject. Compulsory. Compulsory. Right. Not compulsive. Can you see? This is why I've put this in. Can you see the difference between number 5 and number 9? He's a compulsive liar, but a subject will be compulsory. And he revealed his innermost secrets. Well, I'm sure you've learned a few new words today. Right, let's go on. Now, obviously with verbs, so we've done nouns, we've done pronouns, and we've done the adjectives that they describe the nouns and the pronouns. And now we have to move over to verbs. Not going to spend a lot of time on verbs. Verbs is actually a whole program on its own. So in a future lesson, I might be doing verbs with you. But with verbs, you have to know the 3 tenses. You know, the present, the past, and the future. Obviously, auxiliary verbs, you have to know your verbs to be, and transitive and intransitive verbs. But as I say, in the next lesson, we'll definitely discuss it. Most important thing to remember, a verb is an action word, something that you can do. A verb can stand on its own. I can say to you, whistle, think, jump, action words, right? So who's married to verbs? None other than adverbs. And I hope you can see the connection there. Adverbs is married to verbs, right? So, and in that case, we also have 5 types of adverbs, and it's always good to know them by heart, then it's easier to recognize. So the first one is how, and that's the one of manner. So this is how something is done. Is it done quickly, hungrily, fast? We've got place, in other words, where it's done, nowhere, far, near, there. Remember, it always describes the verbs. It's an adverb. Just like the adjective describes the noun or the pronoun, the adverb describes the verb. So we've got manner, how it's done, place, where it's done, and time, when was it done. Soon, immediately, yesterday. So all your time words getting there. So let's look at degree. This one is a bit more difficult. So the question you would ask here is, to what extent is it done? Now, it's done very, it's done extremely well, it's done almost, and then frequency, always, or never, or frequently. Now, I've added these little pictures for you, so that's the way I remember them. So, do you want to quickly go back? Let's just rewind again. We've got manner, we've got a place, we've got the time, we've got a thermometer to tell us a degree. That's how I remember it. And then obviously you've got your little waves for frequency. Right. Now the next one you're looking at is quite an important one, the conjunction. The conjunction is the glue that holds sentences and phrases together and parts of sentences. So let's look at that. Now there's a few rules that I need to share with you, and I hope you know them. In the exam, we'll give you a conjunction, so make sure you use it. Be careful that you don't repeat words. So those words that you can leave out, you should. You have to make use of the correct tense. And then we're going to talk about the concord rule that you have to apply. We'll come back to that. I'm going to show you a few ones that are often crop up and is sometimes a bit difficult. So the first one is the since rule. Now, no other way to explain this to you, but you have to know it. So when we do since, the first verb after since will use the past simple tense. Remember that really easy, it's always called the second column verb. Eat, ate, that one. Slept, that one. Second column verb, and your second verb will then move to the present perfect tense. Do you remember the present perfect tense where you use has or have plus your third column? Okay, so let's look at a sentence and you'll understand. So in this case, we're giving you two sentences here. We say Susan inherits some money, she buy a new house. You need to join them using since. So let me show you what happens. So, then Susan inherited, so that is my second column verb. Can you see there's an ed? Since Susan inherited some money, she has bought. Can you see there? There is my present perfect tense. There's my has. She is singular. I need to have an S here that's has, and bought is a perfect tense. All right. Since Susan inherited, remember that, past simple tense. And the next verb, we say has bought. Right. Let's look at after. So after works completely differently. So you have to make the distinction between since and after. So with after, we start with, in this case, with the present perfect tense, and then we go back to the present simple tense. So we're talking first column verb as well as the third column. The trick here is, as you can see, I'm sticking to the same tense. I'm still in the present tense. So with after, you always stick to the same tense. You're going to use the perfect tense and the simple tense, but I'm still in the present tense. Let me give you an example. Again, we've got two sentences. Joe boiled the water, he make hot chocolate. So we're going to use after, and we're going to say, after Joe has boiled, that's my perfect tense. So here I've got the third column verb. He makes, that's my simple tense. Remember, he's singular. There must be a little s. And this is my simple tense. And it's my first column verb. Right. It's really very easy. So if you know how it works and you know a rule, you can do it. So this is when we were stuck in the present tense. But let's go one step further. And what should happen if we do the past tense? Now, exactly the same thing is going to happen. Our first verb is going to use the past perfect tense, and our second one is going to use the past simple tense. So here we're going to use the third column verb, and here we're going to use the second column verb. Let's see. Got the same sentence. Joe boiled the water, he make hot chocolate. Now, let's see what's the answer. After Joe had boiled, remember past perfect? Past perfect is had, always had. Had boiled the water, he, make becomes made, second column. Most important, please note this, stick to the same tense when using after. You stay in the past, you keep in the past. Right. Remember what they always said, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. No, it's the same here. What happens in the past stays in the past. Don't jump sentences or tenses. Right. Let me give you an example. Here's another one. We're giving you two sentences. My family and I stepped out of the aeroplane in Zanzibar. My family and I were welcomed with fresh flowers. Begin with the following words, when my family and I. Now, be careful with this. Obviously, we don't want to repeat. This is what I said. We don't want to repeat things. So we're going to start with when my family and I. So in the second sentence, we're going to scratch out all of this because this is repetitive. Right, be careful. I want to show you what happens when we combine these two sentences. Let's see. When my family and I stepped out of an aeroplane in Zanzibar. Easy. First sentence didn't change, anything changed. We kept it as it is. The only thing we added, you'll notice, is the comma. We. Now, instead of saying my family and I again, we replaced it with we. We were welcomed with fresh flowers. Full stop. As easy as that. Can you see I didn't change any tenses? I didn't have to, because both these verbs, there's my one verb, stepped, welcomed, in the past tense. As easy as that. Just be careful for this one. So when you use when, always remember, must be a comma. Okay, let's look at the next one. Prepositions. Now, if you look at the word prepositions, remember we're still busy with parts of speech at this stage. If you look at preposition, the word preposition says position. A preposition shows you the position of something. So these are small little words, and they tell you in relation to two words or two phrases, what are the position. Now, let me show you quickly. I'm looking at the difficult ones. Obviously, it's easy. Inside, on top, behind, in front, all of those ones. But there are a few tricky ones. I want to show you just two tricky ones. The word between and among. When do you use which one? Now, look at the picture. The first one says, the mom is standing between the two children. So if we have two things and somebody standing in between them, then we use between, if it makes sense. Got two things at the side and you are standing between them, then it's between. But if there are a lot of people, as in the second picture, we can't say between them because between refers to two. Now we say among. So be careful for this one, hey? Tricky one. Between and among. Between is between two people, among more than two. Look at this one. We say something is in the box or we move into. And I wanted to show you this little arrow here. Into means there's movement. So you're moving into the new house, but you stay in the house. But you're moving into. So there's movement. That's just smaller things for you to remember. Sometimes it's quite difficult to remember when we should use in or on or at. It doesn't always make sense. So I found this beautiful little graphic to help you. So you'll see on the one side we've got time, and on this side we've got location. All right. So we use in when we're talking quite big time. We talk in time-wise, we talk about centuries, decades, years, months, weeks, big time. Locations, we're talking about countries or cities or a neighborhood, a huge area. Then we'll use the preposition in. In the 80s, I stayed in England. Right? Does it make sense? But the moment we become more specific and we get smaller, in other words, for time, we refer to days or weekend. And we're working in location, we're working on streets or avenues. Then I'm going to use on. Can you see the difference? So we were in a country in England and now we're on Oxford Street. So I said on Oxford Street on May the 7th. All right. And even if we get even more specific, and now we get really specific. So we now are talking hours. So at a very specific time, we're going to use at. And if we're going to a very specific address, 734 Oxford Street, then we're going to use at. So I hope you can remember this. In, on, at. So always keep this in mind when you struggle to figure out which one to use. Sure, that's going to help. Right, articles. Let's run through them. I'm sure you know these things, ladies and gents. We've got the indefinite one, the A and the R, and we've got the definitive one, the. I've got a cute little picture for you here. Right, so A and R we use for singular things that we can count. We can count cats and dogs and whatever. But the we use for definitive nouns, very specific things. We'll use the. We will say a book, an apple, but the cat in the hat. Right. So let's look quickly. This is what we've done up to now. We've done all the nouns. Do you remember them? We've got quite a number of them we looked at. We looked at the determiners. We just did. We looked at the pronouns. Remember your pronoun is in the place of your noun. Pronoun. Remember that connection? Right. And we looked at adjectives. Remember, adjectives hang out with the nouns and the pronouns. We looked at your verbs. And we looked at adverbs who's married to verbs. All right. I'm sure you remember them. Now, do you want to try this? We've got here 5 little sentences. And you need to identify the parts of speech. Now, in the exam, you usually will only be given one sentence. But in this case, I thought it would be nice to do all 5 of them. So, I'm sure you can do this, but I think it would be a good idea if I go step by step with you with each one. So, let's look at them. This is what we give you. The question is identify the parts of speech. We gave you she, often, and harsh conditions. She is often driven in harsh conditions. I'm sure this is really easy to you. She is a personal pronoun because she is in the place of a name. That's easy. Now, before we go on, what I would always do is try to find my verb. Because if you find your verb is driven, that's your verb, then it's easier to figure out what the rest are. Now, the little word often, what is the word often doing? Yes, it is describing how time, frequency, how many times is she driven? She's driven often. And that tells me it's an adverb. These two are married because often describes driven. Easy. And if I look at harsh conditions, conditions is a plural, that means it must be a common noun, and harsh is describing it. And what is describing nouns always? Well done. An adjective. I'm sure you got that one right. It's really easy, isn't it? Let's try another one. So we've got here, like many countries, South Africa has a shortage of blood donors. Okay, interesting. Easiest one to find, obviously, South Africa. But what about like in countries? Now, if you remember, like is a conjunction. So that's an easy one. Countries, again, as our plural one. Plain, easy, common noun. And then South Africa is the name. And we know that's a proper noun. Right, because it's written with a capital letter. Now, please remember, can you see there's no hyphen there? Please make sure you spell South Africa correctly. Let's try another one. We encourage the whole society to donate blood. This is really easy, isn't it? Now, once again, whole is describing the society. And to donate is, of course, an action word, which means whole will be an adjective because it describes society. And to donate is, of course, a verb. Because if you donate, it's an action verb. Right. Let's try the next one. Giving blood is one of the easiest ways to contribute to society. I know I'm talking to the experts by now. Giving is a verb. We recognize it with the ing there. Right? Giving is a verb. Off might be a little bit tricky, but I'm sure you know it's a preposition. Yes, you're right. And easiest, comparative. There you go. Adjective. Well done. Well done. I'm sure you got this right. Let's see the last one. Never have I seen such a community spirit. Now, A is obviously an article, and spirit, be careful for this one. Remember, it's an abstract noun. That's the one we can't smell, lick, think, see. It's an abstract noun. And we're going on now with the next one that is concord. Now, again, I know language, if you think you can speak it, you can do it. Oh, it's not always like that. So I suggest you keep a pen handy. Concord means your subject and your verb agrees with each other, which sounds quite easy. But there are a few rules that you have to keep in mind. I know it's all about the rules. So let's run through them quickly. Let's start off easy. If your subject is singular, then your verb must be singular. This is really straightforward. Subject is singular, verb is singular. The black and white cow is eating the grass. Now, this is one cow, and that's why it is eating. It's singular, and that's why we have an S. The actor is famous. Singular. Subject is singular, verb is singular. Rule number 1. Let's go to the second one. If we combine two singular nouns with and it's not a single idea, please make a note of that. We're connecting two singular nouns with the word and it doesn't form a singular idea, then it must be plural. Let me show you. The black and the white cow are eating grass. Now, be careful with this case. In this case, we actually have two cows. We've got a black cow and we've got a white cow. And together, they are eating grass. And because we have and it's not one idea, we're using the plural verb. Right. The table and the chair are on stage. In other words, there are two things that are on stage. Okay. So again, when you read, and this is what I've said the whole time, make a note. Am I talking about one thing or is it two things? Let's look at the next one. Ooh, I love this one. And the best way to remember is it's a little rhyme. You have to remember it. Either or, neither nor, not only, but also. Easiest way. Either or, neither or, not only, but also. And you can see, if I just look at that, there's a number of nouns. No, not. And we're talking about here, you have to look at your verb closer to the subject. So the subject, the closest to the verb, that's the one we're talking about. Let me show you what I mean. Giving you here two sentences. Janet is responsible. The boys are responsible. Let me give you an example. If we use or, Janet or the boys, what are we going to look? We're going to look at the noun closest to the verb. The boys are responsible. Look at the next one. Either the boys or Janet. Now, in this case, Janet is singular and she's now standing closest to the verb. Is. Can you see what's happening here? So look at the noun nearer to the verb. That's the important one. Let's look at the bottom one. Not the boys, but Janet is responsible because Janet is the closest one to the noun, to the verb. Right. Again, either or, neither nor, not only, but also. Look at the noun nearer the verb. Look at all the nearer. That's your key word. On the other side of the spectrum, we've got these guys. With, together with, like, including, as well as. Okay. Now, a verb agrees with the subject the furthest away. Let me show you. Because again, we've got Janet now and the children. Janet is laughing, the children are laughing. Now we're combining sentences. Now, look at the first one. Janet with the children laughing. Now, if we use with, our verb is going to look at the noun at the first one. So what is our first one? Is. Janet is singular. Look at the second one. The children together with Janet laughing. In this case, we are looking at the children, looking at the first noun, and in this case, it's are laughing. Can you see how this works? So you have to be really careful when you know these rules. And the only way is just to remember them off by heart. So these guys, we're going to look at the first ones. Doesn't matter which one it is. You have to look what is the first noun or pronoun. And because of that, you have to decide whether it's singular or whether it's plural. Right. Let's see. Now, rule number 5 says there are certain words are followed by a singular verb. Again, now look at these words we're looking at. Everyone, everybody, no one, nobody. Do you remember these words? Can you remember? It was the indefinite pronouns we talked about. Now, these guys, someone, somebody, something, always takes a singular verb. Remember that. Always takes a singular. Now, let's try this quickly. So I've got here a list of questions for you. And what we have to fill in is, are, or has or have. Let's see if we can do it together. Let's look at the first one quickly. We're giving you apple and pear trees. So why are we using are? Because remember our rule, and. If we have and, we're combining two single things, we have to use are. Right, let's look at the next one. Why? Because there are two types of trees, of course. There's apple trees and there's a pear tree. When are Jock and Sifo leaving? Again, plural. We've got two different things. We've got two different people. And we're going to use are. Dresses sold at the shop are always expensive. Why do you think are we using are if our word shop is singular, but here's the plural one? Well, it's what about all about? It's about the dresses that are being sold, not the shop. We're talking about the dresses. Let's look at the next one. We have the principal and his wife have just arrived. Again, easy. Got two things, we're combining them with and. Immediately when you do it, it has to take a plural. Remember, it's two different people that we have here. Now, the next ones are going to become a little bit more difficult. Not only Louise, is my tea. Not only Louise, but also the boys. Aha! Do you remember our rule? Not only, but also. Look at the noun nearer the verb. In this case, there's our noun closest to our verb. Boys are plural. We're going to use are. Right. Let's try the next one. Neither my sisters nor my brother has been there. The noun closest to the verb again, in this case is singular, I have to use has. Can you see how you have to figure it out? You can't just make a decision and say this is the one. You really have to sit and figure it out. Not only your aptitude, but also your aims are important. Same thing. Because we're using not only, but also. Now, please remember this. In exam, we love giving you only this part. Not only. You have to include the second part, but also. You remember that. Okay, here's another one. Here's another few. Let me run it through you. It's much easier. Right, so the farm with all the implements. Now remember, with means we look at the first noun. So our answer here is going to be is, because farm is the first one and it's singular. That's why we're using is. Right, a teacher as well as, again, our first one is teacher, singular, going to use is. The beautiful girl and her partner, can you see there's our word and we're going to use are, easy one. My mother, like all mothers, now remember like, always use the first one. Can you see how you have to know your rules? Is, because mother is singular. People often guilty of jealousy now. What do you think people are? Is it people is or people are? No, obviously it's are, because people are a lot of people. Now, neither the father nor the sons going overseas. And your answer is? Look at the noun nearer to the verb, and that's why you're going to use are. There are is or are still 4 games to be played. No, games are, of course, plural. And the list of names of swimmers, can you get that one? I say has, because list is singular. Oh, well done, hey? Well done. But can you see how you literally have to sit and figure it out? Don't guess. Now, certain nouns might appear plural, but they're actually taking singular. And I can't explain to you why this is. You just have to know it. So look at these words. Oh my goodness. Athletics, measles, fruit, tidings, series, is. So these are words you have to remember and remind yourself that these guys always taken is. All right? Now, on the other hand, some nouns take a plural verb. Now, look at these guys. People and shorts and things and spectacles and pajamas. Oh my goodness. Let's look at the next one. Now, look at this, is interesting. Remember collective nouns that we talked about? That was in our nouns. Collective nouns are singular. If we're talking about the whole as one thing, but if they're not acting as a whole, in other words, there's some kind of disagreement between them and they're separate entities, then they'll take a plural. Let me show you what I mean. So we've got party or a team is or a crowd is, because they're one thing. We're thinking about them as one thing. Let me give you, the herd of cattle is grazing. So all of them is doing the same thing. It's a herd of cattle and they're all grazing near the house. And that's why it is. But the herd of cattle are scattered over camp. And now in this case, they're not a single entity anymore. They're all over the place. And that is where I'm using are. You have to read very carefully. And if I were you, make a little picture in your mind. That's the easiest way to do it. Now, I love this part. Let's talk cake. I'll show you a mood for a little bit of cake. So, a fraction or a part of one thing is. A fraction of many things are. Let me explain this to you. If you look at my picture, you'll see there's 2/3 of this cake is eaten. It's one cake. So we've just eaten a part of that, and that's when we're going to say 2/3 is eaten. But if I say, if you look at the next picture, 2/3 of the cakes are eaten. Now you can see there are 3 cakes, and in each cake, 2/3 have been eaten. Then we're using are. So the cake is one thing, even though we've eaten 2/3 of it, it's still one cake. But if we have a number of cakes, and out of them 2/3 have been eaten, we're using are. I hope it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, just eat the cake. Right. Much and little, always singular. And many and few is always plural. Right. You have to remember that as well. Oh yeah, this is a cute little riddle that I put in for you. No matter how little or how much you use me, you change me every month. What am I? Right, I didn't know this one either. Do you know? A calendar. We use it every month and we change it every month. It's a calendar. Right. We have a little exercise for you here as well. I'm going to show you 1 or 2 things that I think is really important. Every girl, do you remember everyone, every girl, everybody, everyone? It's always is. So be careful for that one. Just want to highlight to you here 2 liters of milk. It still has been bought. One thing. My pajamas, remember I said your pajamas are too small. And a herd of elephant is, because it's one thing coming from the start. A number, now be careful with this one. The number is singular. A number will be plural. Right. And 50 cents, one singular. And each and everybody, still singular. Right. So there are a number of exercises that you can do here. I bet if you're really struggling with these ones, and I'm sure they're quite difficult, I think you need to ask your teacher to help you with these guys. So the more you're going to practice this, and the more you're going to do these, the easier this will become. Remember the committee? It's always is, hey? Oh, most of us are happy at school. I'm sure you're happy at school. You have to be happy at school. Right. Now, I want to show you quickly a quick one before we go. Part of your question 5 is identifying errors. And it's always question 5.1.1. It's usually 4 sentences. And there are deliberate errors that they place inside these sentences, and you have to pick them up. And the learners always ask me, what do I look for? And let me tell you a secret quickly. What do we usually test? We test spelling, we test concord, apostrophe, the words that are easily confused, tenses, and prepositions. Can you see why you need to know your parts of speech? That is why it's so important. That's why it's so important to know your concord. Because if you know your concord, you will be able to pick up when that subject and that verb doesn't agree. That's when you'll be able to pick it up. So words easily confused, those are your antonyms and homophones and homonyms that they love putting in there. Obviously tenses, prepositions, we talked about. The best way is to look at some dictionaries, and the back of it, they have his list of prepositions. Go through them. Practice, practice, practice is all I can tell you. It's the best exercise ever. If you want to practice your parts of speech, take a paragraph, take a newspaper article, and see which words you are able to identify. Now, the best way to do language is obviously to do it as many times as you can. And if you are still struggling with concord and spelling, the best place is to ask your teacher. I'm sure they will be able to help you. From me, Elizabeth Meyer, thank you for watching this lesson. Goodbye.